Welcome back, folks. It's Michael and Greg, the hosts of the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast, talking to you from the Lighthead online video show. This episode of the show is a special edition. It's about the Matrix and a little article that came out on Bloomberg. But before we get to that, I'd like to tell you that this episode of the Lighthead online video show is brought to you by Keystone Technologies. Go to keystonetech.com, Greg.com, Greggy.
Yeah, I always go check it out because they're coming out with new product all the time, and they're always staying on top of it, innovative, giving it to you at a good price. They have inventory. They have everything you need from a LED lighting standpoint. So check out their website. Stay in touch with them because there's always something new with Keystone.
Yeah, Keystone's got a lot of things going right now. So, Greg, everyone's asking me about the Matrix and all this sort of stuff, and it's funny because there's some of the stuff that came out that was produced and that came out and said, you know, Bloomberg produced this on September, October, whatever, but on June 6th, I've been talking about this for 8 years, Greg.
Yeah, and that article that came out October 4th, it was 2018 from Bloomberg, is titled "The Big Hack: How China Used a Tiny Chip to Infiltrate U.S. Companies." And when you speak about tiny chips, and you can see behind me, here's an example of an LED. You know, this isn't necessarily a great one, but you can see how much stuff is going on in this LED. Get a close-up of it. I don't even know what any of that stuff is, and I think most people in lighting don't.
It's a circuit board.
That's what it's a circuit board, yeah, but what are all the individual pieces on that? You can't tell. I mean, you can see which one is LED, those little yellow dots, sure. But the rest of it,
is it a microphone, a mini camera? Who knows what's in there?
Exactly. So
especially
that's what
with Internet of Things, Greg. When you connect that thing to the internet.
Definitely, and that's what this article said, and we'll dive into more about it. But I'm going to just read a paragraph here. It said there are two ways to spy, or for spies to alter the guts of computer equipment. LED is basically computer equipment in this case. One, known as interdiction, consists of manipulating devices as they're in transit from the manufacturer to the customer. This approach is favored by U.S. spy agencies, according to documents leaked by National Security Agency contractor Edward Snowden, that whole big deal. And the other method involves seeding changes from the very beginning. And one country in particular, it says, has an advantage in executing this kind of attack is China, which by some estimates makes 75% of the world's mobile phones and 90% of its PCs. And 99% of the LED lighting in the marketplace.
You know, it's weird. My sister is an interesting lady. Okay. And she gave me a book for Christmas. And it was the Memoirs of Reinhard Gehlen. Okay. This guy was a really interesting cat. He was a general in the Wehrmacht, which for all of you non-history buffs is the Nazi army, the Wehrmacht.
Okay.
And he was in charge of Foreign Armies East, the spy agency, which spied on Russia during the Second World War. And not to get into too much stuff, this show might be long, but I think it's going to be interesting. Not to get to too much detail there, but so basically he had set up a spy network deep into the Soviet Union that was providing information to the Nazis. And then after the war, along came a guy that you may have heard. I think there's an airport named after him. His last name was Dulles. And I could be wrong. It might be someone else, but I'm 90% sure it was Dulles came along and met General Reinhard Gehlen, and they cut a deal on a handshake. Dulles agreed to give General Reinhard Gehlen cash, U.S. dollars, to keep his spy operation running. General Gehlen would provide information to Dulles on the Soviet Union and what they were up to. And the only part of the deal that was interesting to me was that, obviously he wants money. Okay, he'll continue to spy and do his job. But he said, should there be a conflict between German interests and American interests, I will always take the German interests. And Dulles and him shook hands on this, and it was a handshake deal for like 10 years. One of the parts of the agreement was that the West Germans, that became the West German Spy Agency, which was an unbelievably good spy agency for the West. But one of the parts of the agreement was that General Gehlen would help teach Dulles to set up a spy agency. That spy agency became the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. And so the Central Intelligence Agency grew to be the largest, most effective, and most pervasive spy agency in the world. So Americans, all you people listening out there the biggest, most spying nation in the world is the United States of America. Okay? So you guys spy on everybody. So this idea of being spied on should not be shocking to anyone. Okay? So when you're out there and you're like, oh my God, the Chinese are spying on us. How dare they? Give me a break, buddy. Get a grip. America spies on everybody. The second thing is that, on that sort of vein, is that the type of information in this guy's memoirs, this a former Nazi general's memoirs, the ability, the information they were able to gather without cell phones, without electronic communication devices, without computers, you're talking like writing things on paper and delivering mail to people, monitoring people's mail. The amount of information and intelligence they were able to gather in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s was astounding. Now, what do you think they can do today? One of the questions that Greg asked me on the famous, now infamous Matrix Explained podcast was, why would anyone want to spy on the United States? Do you remember that, Greg?
I don't know if it was that clear, but something like that. Yeah, it was kind of why through lighting, but yeah.
Yeah, well, because lighting is so pervasive and easy. It's so inconsequential. Everyone thinks, oh, it's on my cell phone. It's on my cell phone. Well, what if the lights in what's that? Northrop Grumman's boardroom are hacked, or what if they're able to get this? And a lot of people don't understand that. China and America are already kind of in a war. Just no soldiers fighting yet. This came out last week. A Chinese destroyer sailed within 40 meters of an American warship in a disputed area of the South China Sea. The American vessel was performing a freedom of navigation operation near reefs claimed by China. America's Navy said the Chinese maneuver was unsafe and unprofessional. Now, let me tell you this, guys. These are enormous ships. Okay, this is not like you rolling up in your Minnesota fishing boat, Greg. Like, these ships are huge. They're the size of skyscrapers, and 40 meters is really close. So this is the nation state equivalent of me walking up to you and poking you in your chest and saying, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right? And then the U.S. says, gosh, that's unsafe and unprofessional. Yeah, so me going to poke, let's say I decide that I want to go poke Stipe Miocic in the chest. And he doesn't do anything about it. Right? Why? Because there's serious consequences to all that sort of stuff. So this idea of America and China not being able to, I sometimes I don't get it, Greg. Like, are Americans as naive as they seem sometimes?
Speaking as an American, I would say, yeah. I feel like at times we are. A lot of times we're not as concerned with what else is going on around the world, if that makes sense. I know that some are. I'm speaking from my own standpoint, not on behalf of all Americans, but a lot of times I'm just focused on what I can do and not really thinking about the bigger picture.
I think Canadians are largely the same way, but I'm kind of in this, maybe I'm in this non-naive place, and it seems so obvious to me that what's going on. But I mean, you take a look at something like, okay, so Americans are the richest people in the world. Okay, they consume well, not more than Canadians, but let's say Western countries, America, Britain, Canada, or whatever, are the richest people in the world. Okay, mm-hmm. And other people are not even half as rich as us. Don't you think they would want to take our stuff?
Yeah.
Like, do you think that they want to stay that way? Now, I believe that, China becoming rich would be the best thing for everyone. Mexico becoming rich would be the best thing for everybody. Like, well, I'm not a fixed size pie guy. I think everyone can be rich. But that's not how these other nation states think. They don't think that way, And I think Americans are very naive in terms of how high their quality of living is, how high their standards of living is in comparison. You've been to a Chinese factory. You know how those people live.
Yeah, for sure.
They don't live like, think about how wonderful it would be to be a poor person in the United States in comparison to being a regular person in China. Mm-hmm. I think Americans are unaware of how amazing it is to be an American and how amazing it is, and Canadians too, how amazing. So this idea of like, why would China want to spy on us? Why would they be, want? Well, you need to study some history there. The other thing is like, the other thing with all this stuff about the Matrix and all these kind of issues that we kind of joke about a little bit, but China's a really old country, Greg. I think it's like 3,000 years old of continuous rule, going back to Emperor Wu, like, I don't know, 3,000 years ago or something like that. And the Chinese government, two Chinese governments, one in Taipei and one in Beijing, both see themselves as the inheritor of the Emperor Wu's forwards Chinese history, and to be the curator and the controller of that. America is like a little baby beside these kind of countries. What is it, 1777, when you kicked my ancestors out of the country? Is that when it was? So
something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a refugee from the American Revolution. That's who I'm descended from. But anyway, that's off the topic. But I mean, China's an old country, so they don't look at things in the same way as Americans and Canadians look at everything. I mean, with China, it's like, well, we've been in business for 3,200 years, son, or whatever it is. They're not worried about what happens in 4 years. They're not worried about Donald Trump. They're not worried about Barack Obama. They don't need everything today. They're in a long game against the United States. They're in it for the long run. And they're positioned better now. So they want to spy on you guys. You know why? Because you guys are currently you're technologically superior over the rest of the world. But that gap is shrinking very quickly. And, it's going to be an interesting place when and if like China lands on the moon, say. Let's say China goes into space and lands on the moon. What are you going to do now?
Congratulate them.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll happen. But what's really going to happen, Greg?
Sure. I don't know. I mean, you tell me what's going to happen.
You tell me. I mean, America has this position of intellectual and technological prowess that is receding very, very quickly and eroding very, very, very quickly. And a lot of it is because of Chinese mercantilistic trade practices. And a lot of people don't understand this. Like, China doesn't allow Americans to sell their stuff in China. And if American companies go to set up in China, they have to disclose all of their intellectual property to the Chinese government. Like, what's that about? Right? I mean, we don't make them do that with us. Right? So this idea of putting tariffs on China, it's like, beggar thy neighbor, another beggar thy neighbor trade deal. Dude, you guys are in a serious situation here. And the world is in a serious situation. And, I think America is too busy fighting amongst itself to realize that there's a gathering storm around the West. And, Americans are so self-obsessed, and Canadians as well. We're so self-absorbed into so many useless nonsense issues, about hating on this person and tribalistic politics and all this, that you can't see that the enemy is at the gate, man. And there's so many different issues with respect to China. Now, I'm not anti-China, and I know that your surfing buddy Eddie Chung in San Francisco is a great guy. This is not about individual people of East Asian descent. It's about the machinations of nation states and how geopolitics in the world is conducted using various forms of aggression. Right? So one of those forms of aggression can be trade practices. Another one of those forms of aggression can be sailing your ship really close and letting somebody know this is our China Sea. It's called the South China Sea and it belongs to us. And you're not going to do anything about it when I poke you in the chest. Nothing, because you're scared. Right? So this is the situation that's going on. Now, how do we relate it to lighting? This is a lighting show. Well, look, lighting is a militarily strategic asset for a country. Oh, what are you talking about? Well, we had Dr. Venkat on the show, and he said it's the greatest productivity invention in the history of the world. Did he not, Greg?
He did. That's what the title of it was.
Right. And if you go to war to China, you're screwed. You can't light up your buildings. Right? It's like the old adage, if you don't have a clothing factory, what are you going to go to war in? You're going to go to war naked? Well, you're going to go to war in the dark? You're going to fight in the dark? So there's a lot of situations where, people need to stop the crazy making in politics and all this hostility towards each other and tribalism, and put their heads up and realize that, hey, there are real enemies in the world, and they don't like Americans, and they don't, quite frankly, don't like Canadians. And that's another thing, you know, a lot of people don't understand that there's multiple versions of history. Okay? So not everybody has the same history. So for example, China being a very old nation, they remember the Opium Wars. Now, you know, Americans would say, oh, what the Opium Wars got to do with us? It's got nothing to do with us. America wasn't involved in the Opium Wars. That's the British. That was the British. Do you think, Greg, that the Chinese make any distinctions at all between British and Americans?
I would think they do, but it sounds like they don't.
Well, no, they would say it's those people over there. The guys with that have the democracy and the free enterprise and the rule of law. They're the guys that did this to us 200 years or whenever it was, 1840s or whenever it was. Those guys, they're the ones that did this. Oh no, but it wasn't us. It was the British people. They don't care, dude. Like, there's different versions of history. People look at things very, very differently in other parts of the world. You know, and it was funny because I watched that Conor McGregor fight on Saturday night, Greg, and you know, it was interesting because that guy from Russia, Khabib, jumped over the cage. Did you see it?
No, I heard he got in a fight out in the audience after.
Yeah, he jumped out of the cage and all that sort of stuff. And, oh, what the hell happened? I don't understand. Look, man, people from different cultures are different from us. They don't share it. Like, Khabib didn't grow up watching the WWE and knowing that, hey, we're just shit talking here to promote the event and it gets attention and nobody really cares. He took what Conor McGregor said to him about his family seriously and wanted to kill him. You know, so Americans need to wake up and realize that not everybody likes America. Not everybody, it's a vast majority of, not majority, but a huge portion of the world hates America and would like to see it burned to the ground and wiped from the face of the earth. And whatever way they can get in to disrupt, destroy, steal, take, they will use. And if that's a light bulb in your living room, who'd want Greg Erich's information? Who knows what they would want the information for? That's the scary part. What if they want the information to just pretend they're a U.S. citizen on Twitter or Facebook and disrupt your politics using your light bulbs? Right? Share private information about you to the public that you didn't want anyone to know. And now it's it's absolutely irresponsible for Americans and Canadians and British people to live their lives at such a high level of standard of living and take it for granted and assume that, everyone else in the world just likes their position as second best or likes their position as a middle income, right? Likes their position as in poverty. And they want it to stay that way. And it should stay that way because this is just how it is right now. Guess what? They want to be rich. They don't want to be equal. They don't want to, like when this idea of China's peaceful rise. This is not a Chinese idea. This is a Western idea. It's not their idea, it's ours. And this narrative that China's going to rise peacefully and all this sort of stuff, that's a matter of time until the balance of power switches. And that balance of power is coming quicker than anybody ever dreamed of or imagined. You know why? It's called artificial intelligence. And when something is artificially, the race for artificial intelligence is a military race. It's not a race so you can play virtual reality on your Xbox 5 or whatever. It's an existential race. And, people need to wake up to this. It's not about Facebook and Instagram. It's not about hating on Donald Trump or Barack Obama or whatever. Stop fighting amongst yourselves. You got a real enemy. That doesn't mean that, you should be irresponsible and start wars and like this is right now. If there was a real war between China, it would be fought in China, right? How long do you think that's going to last, Greg?
Unknown.
Right. Like, when will they be powerful enough to fight the war in North America? That would be, like, people don't even Imagine that in their minds. What if they create an artificial intelligence that can disable all America's nuclear deterrent? What if they're able to create an artificial intelligence which can connect to the electromagnetic human brain computer? Come on, folks. Wake up. Take the wax out of your ears. Look around the world. Look around the world. It's not a safe place. And you know what? For the last 75 years, America has kept it safe and continues to keep it safe. So chin up. America is not a bad thing for the world. It's a good thing. It's a force for good in the world. And they need to keep that going. And whether you hate Donald Trump or love Donald Trump or hate Barack Obama or love him or whatever is irrelevant to the question. The world needs America to be strong and free and to enforce the global order, which they've done very responsibly for a long time. And all this hatred and self-hating and all this kind of stuff is crazy. It's like, you know what it's like? When I think about America right now, and Canada's a little bit like this, but America is definitely the worst. You ever go over to somebody's home that's very wealthy, but the family's dysfunctional?
Sure.
You ever been in an environment like that when you're over for dinner? And like they're super wealthy, they live in a big mansion, pool in the backyard, 6 cars in the garage and everything else, but you go over and the family is dysfunctional. And they're saying mean things about each other at the table and insulting each other and taking swipes at each other and just like, oh my God, what's wrong with these people? Can't they see how good they have it, how wonderful their life is? And they're all they're doing is spending their day hating on each other. America right now is like one big, rich, spoiled, dysfunctional family. And you guys need to go to therapy. And Canada's getting the same way too. But there's like this feeling that, nobody can sit down with each other because you're this and you're like, what are you talking about? You're a bunch of rich brats. That's what it is. Like you're spoiled rotten. You don't even know what you have. And same thing in Canada. I'm not pointing a finger at America. There's 3 pointing right back at the Canadian. But I mean, come on, folks. These guys are spying on us. And it's not like I'm not anti-Chinese. I'm not pro-war. But I'm pro-look around. Get a grip. See what's happening. Don't give everything away. It's too precious what we have here. And so the Matrix idea kind of came out of that because, quite frankly, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. The world is becoming very, very crazy. And with all this AI and all this technology and the Internet of Things and, people are running around with the, constantly on their phones and all of their information is in their phone, their pictures and all the stuff they watch on the Internet, whether it be bad or good or disgusting or whatever is being recorded. And it's just a scary time, folks, and it's time for countries and people in the West to take a look at how precious what we have here is and be proud of it and unite under those circumstances instead of dividing. Be realistic. Stop being naive. It's an interesting time. May you live in interesting times. This is an interesting time, and hopefully there's some leaders that can all give our heads a shake. I think Donald Trump is doing that in some ways. It's interesting because he's so hated, but at the same time, it's like he's in his own way, he's standing up for America and the West. And this idea of making America great again, I think people needed to hear that. And I'm not a political guy, and quite frankly, I find Donald Trump offensive a lot of the time. But by the same token, it's like we need that. We need to be proud of who we are. And whether this is about light bulbs or anything else, the Matrix or whatever, there's something to like chin up, man. What we have here is good. And enough's enough. People want what we have, and we can't give it to them. They have to earn it on their own. And if they can take it from us, they will. How's that?
That's intense. So it gets pretty deep there, but yeah, that's what it comes down to. And then what we can do on the lighting side, I don't know how to answer that, but maybe take a look at the manufacturing and the processes that go into the LEDs themselves. Whether we can make more here.
The first step, Greg, is just awareness. That's it. Once you become aware that that there is a the idea of the word escapes me right now. globalism, or what the words escape me, but this idea of a worldwide network of trading and supply chains and all this sort of stuff needs to be looked at in a way, like by lighting manufacturers as, hey, and by politicians as, hey, you know, what do we need here to keep America going if something goes wrong? And lighting is a huge part of that. A lot of people take it for granted. It's one of those things that it's just everywhere all the time. The lights always come on. The electricity always works and all that. And if it didn't work, our standard, like if it didn't work reliably, or we couldn't get replacement light bulbs, or people were spying on us through our Internet of Things because we're just so desperate for innovation and a new great thing that we make a mistake, we're going to lose what we have. And so lighting, the responsibility of lighting manufacturers and those importing products is to be aware that not everything that the Chinese would like to spy on Americans for all kinds of nefarious reasons that are beyond your imagination. So that's what it is to the lighting industry. Be aware. Be aware that is real, and that we need to be careful and mindful of what we do and why we're doing it and whether or not it's even needed. These things are very, very right now, very important because the world is changing very quickly. So I don't know if this is an appropriate show for the Lighthead Online video show, but we're going to shoot it over. And I'd like to say right now that, guys, that I'm starting my own podcast called the Get a Grip on Life podcast. GetAGripOnLife.com. It doesn't talk about conspiracy theories. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. That's not what I do. I have theories of conspiracy sometimes, but I don't buy into chemtrails and all this other stuff. But yeah, go to GetAGripOnLife.com. So I throw a little plug in for my own show. But it's not always about this kind of a topic. It's about a whole host of different things. But check that out if you're interested in my take on things. And, Greg, from my perspective, I have 4 kids. I want this place to keep going, Canada to keep going, and I want America to keep going. And I want the West generally to be awesome. We can go to Europe and walk around and be free and enjoy the world as it is and eat new foods and all this, but we have to know that what we have here is so precious.
Very important. Good points all around. Good rant.
Good rant. Keystone Technologies. Go to KEYSTONETECH.com, baby. KeystoneTech.com. And that is the deep, deep dive into the Matrix with Michael Colligan and Greg Ehrich from the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Thanks, folks.